Welcome back, viewers. I'm Surbhi Onyal and I teach philosophy at Hansraj College, University of Delhi. Friends, we are doing a lecture series on Introduction to Philosophy, and in this we have been discussing Nyāya epistemology. In our previous lectures, we had discussed perception, inference, as well as comparison. And in this lecture, we would be discussing Shabd or the verbal testimony as a valid means of knowledge. So, according to Nyāya Philosophy, Shabd or verbal testimony is the fourth and the last valid source of knowledge. Shabd literally means verbal knowledge, and this is considered to be the fourth kind of praman or the means of valid knowledge. It is the knowledge of objects derived from words or sentences. All verbal knowledge, however, is not valid. It is defined as the statement of a trustworthy person or aptavakya, and consists in understanding its meaning. So, Shabd is the instructive assertion of a reliable or trustworthy person. So, what do we mean by Shabd, and how is it considered to be a praman or a source of valid knowledge? So, this is a kind of knowledge of objects that we derive from words or sentences. So, as the title itself suggests that it is a verbal testimony or Shabd. So, this kind of knowledge that we get, it is derived from words or sentences, but not every kind of verbal sentences and words are considered to be valid. It is defined as the statement of a trustworthy person. So, only when it is coming from a trustworthy person or an aptavakya, trustworthy person is also known as aptavakya, and it consists in understanding its meaning, that is when we can say that we have, or we can say that it is verbal testimony. So, Shabd is instructive assertions of a reliable or a trustworthy person. So, a verbal statement is valid when it comes from a person who knows the truth and speaks the truth about anything for the guidance to other persons. So, in different sectors, you might have observed that there are certain people only whose statement would be considered valid. Fine. Why? Because they are the trustworthy persons, and when they say something, that turns out to be true. So, in this case, if we look at from the perspective of knowledge, the verbal statement would consider to be valid when it comes from a person who knows the truth, and we know that that person speaks the truth about anything for the guidance of the other person. So, it's commonly observed that a sentence or statement on its own doesn't provide us with knowledge about things. Likewise, simply perceiving the words within a sentence doesn't impart any knowledge about the object being discussed. So, the knowledge from verbal statements only emerges when one perceives the word and comprehends their meanings. So, mere perception of the word or merely perceiving the word does not guarantee that it is going to give us knowledge. Fine, or just merely by observing a sentence or a word in a sentence doesn't imply that we will get knowledge. How do we actually get knowledge from the words is when we perceive the words and when we are able to comprehend their meaning. Only then they would provide us knowledge. Mere perceiving of the words by hearing it or seeing the written words does not guarantee knowledge. Only when you are able to perceive the words along with comprehending their meaning, then you are set to gain knowledge. So while the validity of verbal knowledge depends on its being based on the statement of a trustworthy person, its possibility is conditional on the understanding of the meaning of that statement. Therefore, in Shabd or testimony as a valid source is fundamentally involves understanding the meaning embedded in the statements of the trustworthy individuals. So what do we really mean to say here is that while we are saying that we get verbal knowledge from a trustworthy person, but merely getting those statements from a trustworthy person again does not guarantee knowledge. If you don't know the meaning of the terms, if you don't know the meaning of the statement, then those statements and the words doesn't mean anything to you and you won't be able to gain knowledge. So, what we are trying to actually establish or discuss here is that the verbal knowledge depends on its being based on the statements of a trustworthy person. It is the possibility, or you can say its possibility is conditional on the understanding of the meaning of that sentence. So it's based or it is conditioned on understanding the meaning of the statement. So therefore, in Shabd or testimony being considered as a valid source by Nyayikas, it fundamentally involves that we understand the meaning that is embedded in the statements or in the words that are being used by the trustworthy person. So the trustworthy person merely uttering a sentence or uttering various words in a sentence doesn't convey or doesn't give us verbal knowledge. It would be considered as verbal knowledge only when you also understand the meaning of those statements. So in the case of spoken sentences, we have an auditory perception, and in that of written sentences we have visual perceptions of the constituent words. Secondly, there must be an understanding of the meaning of the words perceived by us. So, it is through this understanding of the meaning of the words that we come to the final step, namely the verbal knowledge of objects or truth about certain objects. So, the sentences and the words in the sentences can be known through, or you can say you can grasp them through auditory perception, and in the case of written sentences we can have visual perceptions of the constituent words that are used in a sentence. But along with that, we also need to understand the meaning of the words that we are perceiving. So mere perception of the words again wouldn't give us a valid verbal knowledge. Along with those perception, that perception is necessary, that we are having an auditory and visual perceptions of these statements. Along with that, there has to be an understanding of the meaning of the words perceived by us. And it is this process of understanding the meaning of the words that we finally get a verbal knowledge of objects or the truth about certain objects. Therefore, the karana or the special cause of Shabd or valid verbal knowledge is the knowledge of the words, Padgyan, which leads to the knowledge of objects through its function, vyapar, of recalling to our minds the meanings connected with words or sentences. So here the special cause in the valid verbal knowledge becomes the knowledge of the words. Fine, and that this knowledge of the words is considered to be a special cause or karana, which will then lead us to the knowledge of objects through its function. And through that we recall in our mind the meaning that is connected with the word or the sentence. And that's how the whole process of valid verbal knowledge is gained or facilitated. Only when we have knowledge of the words and what functions they are performing and how we recall the meaning that are associated with those words or the sentence. Now a sentence, if we talk about sentence, a sentence is defined as a collection of words, and a word is defined as that which is potent to convey its meaning. The power in the word to convey its meaning comes according to ancient Nyāya from God and according to the later Nyāya from long established conventions. Testimony is always personal. It is based on the words of trustworthy person, human or divine. So as we were talking about how we get knowledge through sentences or statements from the trustworthy person, but along with that we also need to understand the meaning of the word and the sentence. And then we are trying to understand what really do we mean by sentence and how is this sentence made. So sentence is defined as a collection of words. So when different words they are collected together, that's when a sentence is made. And this word, these words or the word that are being used in the sentence, they are defined as that which have potency or they're potent to convey its meaning. So the power of the word to convey its meaning, that comes according to the ancient Nyāya. This power of the word to convey a meaning comes from God, while for the later Nyāya or the Navya Nyāyikas you can say, they come from the long established conventions, that how we use it, how it is being used in the community. That's how that power in the words to convey its meaning comes from. So the testimony, if we are talking about the testimony, it is always personal and it is based on words, and those words could be of a trustworthy person, could be a human or divine. So on the basis of that we can say that testimony is of two kinds based on who is giving those words and statements, or whose words and statements are we referring to. And these two kinds of testimonies are scriptural or Vedic and secular or Laukic. The Vedic testimony is perfect and infallible because the Vedas are spoken by God. So since these words and sentences are coming from the God and they are mentioned in the Vedas, they are perfect and they are infallible. While the secular testimony, being the words of human beings who are liable to error, it is not infallible because human beings can make errors. Fine, so it is not infallible. Only the words of trustworthy persons who always speak the truth, that is valid. Others are not considered to be as valid. So only sentences from a trustworthy person in the case of secular testimony would be considered as valid, others would not be considered as valid. Now let us try to understand two different kinds of shabd, drishtarth and adrishtarth. The first is limited to the ordinary sensible objects in this world, while the second relates to the supersensible objects which cannot be known by the means of perception. So they are not there in front of us, they are in fact considered to be the supersensible objects. Under the first head, we are to include trustworthy assertions of ordinary persons, maybe the saints and the scriptures insofar as they bear on the perceptible objects of the world. For example, a trustworthy person says that a grass is green. So this sentence is about the sensible objects, ordinary sensible objects in this world. So it is the first kind of Shabdarth. While the second will include all the trustworthy assertions of ordinary persons, maybe saints, prophets, and the scriptures insofar as they bear on the supersensible realities. For example, the scientists' assertion about atoms, ether, electrons, vitamins, etc., and maybe the prophet's instructions about virtues and vices, and the scriptural text on God, heaven, future life or afterlife. All these are considered to be supersensible realities which are not in our perceptible realms. So it's beyond that. So all the kinds of statements related to this kind of reality are considered to be the second kind of Shabdarth. Now, as we discussed earlier, that a word is a potent symbol which signifies an object, and a sentence is basically a collection of these words. But a sentence, in order to be intelligible, it must conform to certain conditions. So as we discussed, that sentence is a collection of these words, but is mere collection of words a sentence? Will that provide us a meaning? So for a sentence to be intelligible, to be meaningful, it must conform to certain conditions. Like suppose we say that a sentence consists of words which imply one another. So a word cannot by itself convey a full meaning. So just a single word wouldn't convey the entire meaning of the sentence. So it must be related to other words in order to convey a complete meaning. For example, the word bring, if we just use this term bring, it does not make full sense. It doesn't give us a complete sentential meaning by using just one word. So it provides an expectancy in the mind of some other, or in the mind for some other word or words. So the words imply one another. So if I say bring, it would generate an expectancy in my mind to add certain more words so that I can make sense of this term bring. So I would ask bring what? And this generates an expectancy to add more words to it. And the words imply one another to convey and that a complete meaning. So a sentence consists of words which have fitness for one another. That means mutual fitness of word is another condition of intelligibility of a sentence. So a sentence consists of words which have close proximity to one another. It means that the words constituting a sentence should be uttered in close succession without taking very long intervals between one word and the other. So the comprehension of the meaning of the sentence depends upon the knowledge of the intention of the speaker as well. Hence, a sentence, in order to be intelligible, must consist of words which are interdependent on, compatible with, and with one another to convey the meaning in conformity with the speaker's intentions. So with this background, let us now consider what are the 4 conditions for an intelligible sentence. And those 4 conditions are akanksha, yogyata, sanidhi and tatparya. The first is expectancy or akanksha. It is the quality of words of a sentence by which they expect or imply one another. As a word cannot by itself, convey a complete meaning, it must be brought into relation with other words in order to express a full judgment. So as we were taking the example earlier, where we took the example that we took just one word, that one word will not be able to provide us a complete meaning. And the quality of words is such that they expect to imply or imply one another, that it will be added by other words as well. So, since it cannot give a complete meaning itself, so it must be brought into relation with other words in order to express a full judgment. So when one hears the word bring, this bring is not giving us a complete knowledge or complete meaning. So when we hear this word, or when this word is uttered before us, we once ask that what? The word bring has a need for some other words denoting some object or objects. For example, the jar. So when somebody asks me to bring, and immediately what comes to my mind is bring what? So the term bring has this expectancy that certain other words or objects should be added to it. In the case of bring, maybe we would say bring the jar. So this bring expects these object or objects to be added to it in order to give us a complete meaning. So in the absence of such words, it has no meaning and it falls short of a complete judgment. Similarly, a word in the nominative case requires a verb to convey a complete meaning. So the akanksha or expectancy of words is the relation between kriyatva and karatva, the verb and the case endings implied by it, and this is known as akanksha. So in a sentence, expectancy is important, as just one word wouldn't convey the entire meaning and it expects other words to be added with it. Coming now to the second condition, which is competency or yogyata. The second condition of the combination of words in a sentence is then yogyata or mutual fitness. It consists in the absence of contradiction in relation to the objects denoted by a sentence. So when a meaning of a sentence is not contradicted, there is yogyata or fitness between its constituent words. What do we mean to say here is that it's very important that the words in a sentence, so various words that through which we make a sentence, they should have a mutual fitness with each other. That means they should not contradict each other. So there should be an absence of contradiction in the relation of the objects denoted by the sentence. So when the meaning of a sentence is not contradicted, only then we can say that there is a mutual fitness between its constituent words. So if we say sentence like moisten the plants with fire, is wanting in fitness because there is a contradiction between fire and moistening. Hence there must not be any incompatibility between the meaning of the different words so as to render the whole sentence meaningless. So if we use such words in a sentence which are not mutually fitting each other, as they are contradictory to each other, this kind of sentence would be meaningless. Because we know that in such a case, when we are saying moisten the plants with fire, it is not the characteristic of a fire to moisten the plants. And this shows that there is a contradiction, and such kind of sentence are meaningless. They do not convey any meaning here. So we need to avoid such kind of words in a sentence. The third is proximity or sanidhi. Sanidhi or asati is the third condition of verbal knowledge. It consists in the proximity between different words of a sentence. If there is to be an intelligible sentence, then its constituent words must be continuous with one another in time or space. So spoken words cannot make a sentence when they are separated by long intervals of time. Similarly, written words cannot construct one sentence when they are separated by long intervals of space. So these words in the sentence should not have long gaps, otherwise we will not be able to convey the meaning properly. So when we say the words like bring a cow, will not make a sentence when uttered on 3 days or written on 3 different pages. Even though they possess the first 2 marks like expectancy and fitness, yet they would not be able to provide us with a meaningful sentence. The last is the purport or the tatparya. Tatparya, as a condition of verbal knowledge, stands for the meaning intended to be conveyed by the sentence. So a word may mean different things in different cases. Whether it means this or that thing in a particular case depends on the intention of the speaker who uses the word. So to understand the meaning of a sentence, we must consider the intention of the writer or the speaker who uses it. Why? Because there are times when one word has different meanings, and it solely depends on the intention of the speaker that which meaning is he or she trying to associate in that particular context. Thus, when a man asks to bring sandhava, he is at a loss to understand whether he is told to bring salt or a horse, for the word means both. This can be ascertained only if we know the intention of the speaker. Hence, the understanding of a sentence depends on understanding of the intended meaning. In the case of ordinary sentences used by human beings, we may ascertain their tatparya from the context in which they are used. So thank you, viewers. With this, we come to an end of a lecture on Nyāya epistemology. As Nyāya epistemology, there are 4 pramans that have been accepted, and we have covered all those 4 praman. So thank you for staying with us, and with this we come to an end of our lecture. Thank you so much.